Well, hey guys, Happy New Year. I hope it was good. Hope you had a great Christmas, New Year's. Like Kelly said, if you're here for the very first time or you're joining us online, welcome. We're pumped that you're here. My name's Matt. I'm one of the pastors here. And like she said, you picked a great day to come if this is your first time, because we are starting season 3 of this series that we're calling The Way, just walking through the Gospel of John. It's kind of hard to believe that we started at the end of 2022 and now here it is 2024. So if you've missed any of season 1 or 2, all of that's online. I would encourage you to catch it up. But before we jump into 3, let me just kind of give a really high-arcing overview of what this is. John, this guy named John, he was one of Jesus' 12 disciples. He was one of 3 guys that Jesus invested the most in. And basically the way that John is described, he might have been Jesus' best friend. Like that's kind of cool. And throughout John's gospel, there's this question that he's trying to answer over and over and over again. It might be a question that you're asking right now. The question he's trying to answer is, who is Jesus? Like, who is this guy? Because the answer to that question matters. Now, through the rest of John's gospel that we're going to cover in this season, most of this happens really over a 4-day period. Chapter 13 through 17 all happens in one night, the night before the crucifixion, and it's Jesus talking with his disciples. It's just him and the 12, that's it. So you get some of his best teaching moments. You get some of his best promises. Maybe the most concentration of truth that Jesus revealed in one spot happens in those 4 chapters. And like one of the things that Jesus says at the end of chapter 13, verse 34, he says, okay guys, here's a new commandment that I give you. Love one another. Love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. Okay, cool. Love one another. Got it. I mean, that seems kind of obvious. Jesus, what else you got for us? Now, I think that this actually might be, this love one another, I think this might be one of the things that's glossed over more than anything else that Jesus says. Because it seems so simple, it seems so straightforward, and it is. Love one another, gotcha, okay. But what gets glossed over is what this actually looks like and the impact that it can have. Like the serious impact that it can have. Like Jesus says, okay, love one another, what's that actually look like? Well, how did Jesus love people? Well, he loved them by giving. Jesus was generous. He loved them by walking and entering into their mess. Jesus wept with people. He walked with them in hard circumstances. He loved people by protecting them. Well, there's the woman that gets caught in adultery. We covered that on Easter in season 2. And he protects her from getting killed. Or the boy that's possessed by a demon, and the demon keeps trying to throw him into a fire. Jesus protects by freeing him from that. Like he loved by protecting people. He loved people by telling them the truth. You cannot love someone unless you're willing to tell them the truth. And at the same time, he gave grace, because you also cannot love someone unless you're willing to extend grace to them. He loved them through forgiveness. You love people by forgiving them. I mean, these are just some of the ways that he loved them. And then there's actually another way that he loved them. And there's a really powerful example of this at the beginning of chapter 13. Listen to this. Before the Passover celebration, Jesus knew that his hour had come to leave this world and return to his Father. He had loved the disciples during his ministry on earth, and now he had loved them to the very end. That's great news for us. It was time for supper, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had given him authority over everything, and that he had come from God, and he would return to God, so he got up from the table. He took off his robe, he wrapped a towel around his waist, and he poured water into a basin. Then he began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that he wrapped around him. Does washing someone else's feet sound weird? Yes, the answer would be yes, that does sound weird, at least to us. But back then, in first century Judea, where this is happening, this wasn't weird. This was actually a custom. What was weird was that Jesus was doing this. So whenever you went to a meal like this, when you showed up, your feet would be washed. You wouldn't wash your own feet. No, the lowest ranking servant would wash everyone's feet. Now, this isn't a job that any of us would want to do today. I certainly don't want to touch any of y'all's feet. None of us would want to do this today. But it would have been even nastier back then. Because back then, most people walked everywhere they went. On any given day, you might be walking a number of miles, and you're going to do that barefoot or in sandals. So you're walking barefoot or sandals a number of miles on a given day. You're walking on dirt roads in the hot Middle Eastern sun. And you're walking on the same dirt roads that are shared by animals who like to leave nice little surprises for you if you catch my drift. Like, imagine think about this. Imagine going to Frontier Days up in Cheyenne. You already know where this is going, good. Or any rodeo. So you go up there, it's July, you're hot, your feet are sweaty, but you're not wearing any shoes. You're walking around all day barefoot. You're walking through the animal barns. You're walking through the stables. You're walking on that straw or those wood chips that are there to make it easier to clean up those animal surprises. You're walking on hot metal bleachers. You're walking through freshly spilled beer. You're walking in the public restrooms that thousands of other people, that's just, I can't even say it. That's nasty. Like you're walking around Frontier Days all day barefoot. Your feet are going to be gross, are they not? That's what it would have been like back then. And when you show up to a meal, the lowest ranking servant would wash everyone's feet before the meal. That was expected. What was unexpected was that Jesus was doing this. Jesus is the leader. Jesus is the most influential person in that room. Jesus has more respect, more honor than anybody there. Like he should be the last person that's washing people's feet. And yet he's the one that's willingly doing this. And that's messing with their heads. When Jesus came to Simon Peter, Peter said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? And Jesus replied, you don't understand now what I'm doing, but someday you will. No, Peter protested, you will never, ever wash my feet. Jesus replied, okay, unless I wash you, you won't belong to me. Simon Peter exclaimed, then wash my hands and my head as well, Lord. I love Peter, not just my feet. And Jesus replied, a person who is bathed all over does not need to wash except for the feet to be entirely clean. And you disciples are clean, meaning they put faith in him. That's why they're clean. But not all of you, for Jesus knew who would betray him. That's what he meant when he said, not all of you are clean. And after washing their feet, he put on his robe again. He sat down and asked, do you understand what I'm doing? You call me teacher and Lord, and you're right, because that's what I am. And since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. I've given you an example to follow. I do as I have done to you. I tell you the truth, slaves are not greater than their master, nor the messenger more important than the one who sends the message. Now that you know these things, God will bless you for doing them. Like you may know this story pretty well, or maybe this is your first time hearing this story. But just think about that for a second. Jesus washing people's feet, people that have been at Frontier Days all day. I mean, that's just kind of hard to comprehend. So what I think is really important is that we can't miss both the symbolism and the example here. First, the symbolism. Jesus washing the nastiest parts of these guys. For us, for you and me, that means he'll wash the dirtiest parts of us. I'm not talking physically. I'm talking that thing that pops into your head immediately. That thing that nobody else knows about and you don't want anybody to know about. Or that thing that keeps happening and you can't I can't get out of this. Maybe it's something that you're doing right now. Maybe it's something that happened decades ago. Or maybe it's something that's never tangibly happened, but it's this thing that goes on in your mind. Like whatever the dirtiest, the darkest, or the most damning thing about you, Jesus is saying, I can clean that. I will clean that. I want to clean that. But I'm a liar. Clean. But I'm a felon. Clean. But I'm a narcissist. Clean. But I have sexual baggage. Clean. But this has happened to me. Clean. But I'm just this perpetual jerk to people. Clean. Well, I've been fighting addiction for what seems like forever. Clean. Well, I have this scarlet letter that's attached to me because of this thing over here. Clean. Well, I've been a terrible spouse or a lousy parent. Clean. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter at all what it is. There is no greater cleaning agent than the cross. Like Jesus cleaning and washing you, that's great news for us. Man, that's great news. The question is, do you trust him to do it? That's the symbolism of what's happening here. And then there's the example. And this is the thing that Jesus was really getting at. Voluntarily doing the task of the lowest ranking servant. You got to lower yourself to do that. The example is to lower yourself, not prop yourself up. And that's hard to do because that definitely goes against our human nature. And it definitely goes against a world that says you get yours. A world that says self is king. Or a world that says, look at me, look at me. Jesus is like the example he sets is, no, don't do that. Lower me. Lower me. That takes humility. I think it was C.S. Lewis that said, humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. It's a great distinction, isn't it? Humility is not just you degrading yourself in your mind like, oh, I'm no good. No, that's not humility. It's just removing yourself as the central focus in your mind. That's what humility is. And it's also what's needed if you're going to set some stuff aside. When Jesus starts washing these guys' feet, he takes off his robe and he sets it aside. Why? Because his robe was going to get in the way. It was going to get in the way of him lowering himself. It was going to get in the way of him serving these guys like this. So if you and I, if we're going to follow the example that Jesus sets, then there's going to be some stuff that's going to get in the way if we don't set it aside. Like maybe comfort. I'm going to just talk high level. Like comfort. This one's a struggle for me. I don't know if you can relate to this, but I like to be comfortable. I like that. Now, there's nothing wrong with comfort. There's nothing wrong with comfort at all. Just like there was nothing wrong with Jesus' robe. But if you want to follow the example, if I want to follow the example that Jesus sets, then man, you're going to have to set aside something like comfort because sometimes to serve someone like Jesus, that's uncomfortable. Comfort's fine, but my comfort is not more important than serving you. Or maybe it's time. This one can easily be a struggle. I think there's a mindset that we can get into that thinks, you know what, hey, because time is a limited resource that we all have, well then it wouldn't be a good idea to lower myself to serve someone in this way because that might not be a best use of my time. I might be wasting my time. Now, I don't know if you've ever thought this way before, but there have been spots where I have wanted my time to get in the way so I don't have to lower myself and serve someone. Oh man, I would love to do that for you. I would love that, but man, I just don't have time. You've thought that before, haven't you? Like when people are moving, right? That's when you're gonna know who your real friends are. Oh, I would love to help you move, but I can't that day. I have an eye doctor appointment. It's 9 months away. You have an eye doctor appointment? Yeah, it's on Saturday. Your eye doctor works on Saturdays? I'm sorry, I just don't have time, right? Time's important, but my time is not more important than serving you if I want to follow Jesus' example. He's on the clock. He's about to be crucified. He didn't have any time left. Or maybe it's pride. This is the obvious one. Pride is the antithesis of humility. Really, pride is the antithesis of Jesus. And this one's hard because pride is all about elevating yourself. Your pride wants to elevate you and it wants to fight against anything that would threaten that or lower you. So it's hard to set aside. But here's the truth. You cannot follow the example Jesus sets without setting aside your pride. Or maybe it's your level in life. Now, here's what I mean by this. I think it's very easy to get into this thought process, and I don't think anybody actively thinks this way, but we can fall into this mode of thinking where we believe that because I'm at this level in life, arbitrary level, because I have this success, because I have this resume, because I have this skill set, because I've accomplished this, well, now I'm at this level, and why would I lower myself below that? Maybe we feel entitled that we don't have to do that. Now, it's just not good use of my time because look at what I've accomplished. Look at my resume. Look at what I lead. To lower myself below that, man, that's just a waste of my time. Why would I do that? Now to be straight up, we should invest our skills and our experience in ways that come and bring the biggest impact. Absolutely. But what needs to be set aside is that real subtle mindset. So hear me on this. If you believe that serving is below you, if you believe, you know what, it's just because I've hit this level, because I have this status, because I have this skill set, that serving is below you, then leadership and influence are above you. You're not ready for it. You're not ready for leadership or influence. Because if you have it, you'll use it poorly. And what will probably happen is you'll probably hurt people. Real leadership, real influence is an invitation to lower yourself. And this is something I have to remind myself all the time. Because, frankly, there's times I don't do well with this. And I mess it up. Jesus is the example. He's the Son of God, God in human flesh. And he like nobody's higher than Jesus, and yet he lowered himself. You can't get higher than Jesus, and he lowered himself to wash people's feet that have been in frontier days all week long. I mean, listen to Philippians 2. This is what it says. Philippians 2, 5-8. You must have the same attitude You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling on to. I'm not entitled by this. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave. That's feet washing. And he was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on a cross. So to follow Jesus' example, my level in life is not more important than you. It's not more important than serving you. And anything that gets in the way has to be set aside so we can follow Jesus' example to serve. Him serving is how we love like him. That takes humility. Not just to lower yourself, but also who you're lowering yourself for. Think about who's at this dinner. Think about whose feet he's washing. One person in particular. Whose feet is he washing? Judas. That means something. The guy that's about to betray him. And Jesus knows this. Jesus knows it's only a couple hours away. So why would he do this? Why would he serve and love this guy like that? That guy doesn't deserve this. Judas only deserves what's coming to him. Like, he doesn't deserve the Son of God to wash his nasty feet. So why would Jesus do this? Is he trying to score points with Judas? Judas isn't going to change his mind. Jesus is still going to get betrayed. He's still going to get killed. So why would the Son of God love Judas that way? Well, the reason why goes back to the example. It's one thing to wash the 12's feet. Because we can wrap our heads around that. Okay, I get it. Humble myself so I can serve other people. That's how I love like Jesus. I get that. But to wash Judas's feet, that's taking the example to a whole nother level. The example to us is to love even when it's hard. You love someone by serving them when it's inconvenient, and that can be hard. You love someone by giving when it hurts, and that can be hard. You love someone by investing time and energy in their welfare instead of yours, and that's hard. You love someone by taking their unfair or condescending criticism without fighting back, and that's hard. You love someone by forgiving them even when they don't ask for it, and that's really hard. He's giving us an example to love when it's hard. Because there's going to be plenty of times in your life, there's going to be plenty of times when it's going to be hard for you to love someone else. Not just when you have to set stuff aside like comfort and time and pride and your level in life. That's the easy stuff. But it gets really hard to love someone who's wronged you. Now I wish this wasn't true, but there have been too many times that I would like to admit where I have fallen way short of Jesus on this one. Let me give you an example. Years ago, there was a guy who claimed to be my friend who just stabbed me in the back, betrayed me, lied to my face multiple times. When I confronted him about it, he just doubled down on the lies. Behind my back, this guy disrespected me to people who do respect me, just as an attempt to undermine me. And this went on for a while. It went on for a while. And it hurt. I was ticked off. I was really ticked. And I hadn't done anything to garner this as retaliation. I hadn't done anything. What it really boiled down to was this guy did not like the influence and leadership that I had, and he wanted it for himself. So it's kind of that old thing where, you know what, I'm just going to, in order to raise myself up, I'm going to pull somebody else down. That's what it was. So to love this guy like Jesus sets an example was going to be hard. And I didn't. Now, I didn't go on the offensive against him, which I very much wanted to. And I could have. I had the credibility, I had the influence, I could have flayed this guy in front of people. I wanted to, but I didn't. And I thought that was lowering myself. Okay, because if I do this, if I just go and just expose this guy and what he's doing to me and who he really is, actually that's going to cause more damage to more people. So I'm just going to take this. I thought that was me lowering myself to be like Jesus, but it wasn't. The way that I needed to love him like Jesus loved Judas was for me to forgive him even though he didn't ask for it. And I didn't. I didn't forgive him for 2 years. When people started to trash this guy because they started to see that he was shady, I didn't stop the slander or the gossip, which made me an accomplice to it. In Job, when Job was talking about all the horrible stuff that he was suffering through, he says to God, hey, if I have rejoiced at the ruin of the man who hates me. So basically, like, God, if I've rejoiced because this guy who hates me, his life is falling apart, if I've done that, and I realized that's exactly what I did. It's exactly what I did. When all this stuff started coming back on him, because eventually that's going to happen. If you do shady things, eventually it's coming back on you. When that stuff started to happen, in my mind, I was glad. I was pleased by that. Don't follow my lead on this one. Don't rejoice in or hope for the ruin of people who have wronged you. And that's hard. That's really hard, especially if you're innocent or they've done something egregious against you. Now, I'm not saying just let stuff happen to you. No, not at all. And it doesn't mean that there aren't going to be consequences or that person deserves consequences. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying if you rejoice in or hope for the ruin of people who wronged you, you're putting yourself in a prison. You're putting yourself on a never-ending emotional roller coaster. When that person is low, you're going to be riding high. When that person's riding high, you're going to be in a low despair. You're basically now attaching yourself to that person. So however they're doing is going to directly affect you. They're actually controlling you now. Don't do that to yourself. On top of that, it just invites things in like bitterness, envy, and gossip. I was guilty of all three of those things with that guy. And that stuff will just eat you from the inside out. It'll destroy you. I've said this before. Not forgiving someone is like you drinking poison and hoping that other person dies. That's really what it does. Don't do that to yourself. Like, that's not what Jesus did. He didn't do that with Judas. He didn't do that with countless other people. I mean, just forget Judas for a second. Think about the other 11 guys that he's washing their feet. Think about those guys. In just a few hours, one of those guys is going to deny him. The other 10 are going to desert him. Jesus knew that was going to happen. He knew all of that, but he doesn't lash out to Adam. Instead, he just grabs a towel. Or the people that spit on him and mock him while he's on the cross. He didn't go on the offensive. He didn't call down a legion of angels to wipe him off the face of the earth. I think that would have been pretty awesome to see happen, but that's not what he did. Instead, he says, what? Father, forgive them. It's really easy to love the ones that love you. It's Christ-like to love the people who hurt you or hate you. Jesus is loving when it's hard. He's given us an example to follow. And this example, it has a profound impact that I don't think we really understand or realize. We don't realize what this will actually do if we follow his lead on this. Like, go back to the end of John 13 or 34 and 35. Go back to the command. He said, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, I've lowered myself to serve you. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. Here's the whole purpose of what just happened. By this example, by this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. That's the reason right there. His example, to love and to serve in this way, to lower himself in this way, to love when it's hard. The whole purpose was, so by this, all people will know. What will they know? That you're my followers. A follower of Jesus is a disciple. That's what a disciple is. Disciple means apprentice. So by this, they're going to know that you're a follower and an apprentice of Jesus. Not by your giftings, not by your talent, not by the amazing things that you can do in or for the church. That's not how they're going to know. They're not going to know by your doctrinal purity or your stance on controversial subjects. That stuff matters, it's important, but that's not how people are going to know. They're going to know by the way you love each other. And yeah, Christians, we're called to love all people, but right here, this example, he's specifically talking about Christians loving Christians. Specifically talking about us loving each other. Why? Like, why does that matter? Because if we're doing that, if we're loving each other like Jesus loved us, then other people will see that, then they'll know who we are. If they know who we are, then we can introduce them to the one that they need to know. I mean, think about this for a second. Jesus isn't walking around on the earth anymore today. He's not. So how are people going to get to know him? By his disciples. Well, how will people know who the disciples are? Because there's plenty of people out there that like to claim it. that don't look anything like Jesus, you don't see any spiritual fruit. Well, how will they know? How will they know who are the real ones, who are the followers? How will they know who are the frauds or just the fans, not the followers? Well, they're going to know by, they love each other like Jesus loved them. Like, I don't think I'm overstating this. This might be the greatest gift that we can give to the world. That if we love each other like Jesus loved us, this might be the greatest gift that we can give to the world. We live in such a hostile and divided world right now, and I think the world is starting to get sick of the division. It hasn't happened yet, but I think it's coming where the pendulum is going to start to swing back. And when that happens, the world is going to start to look for real unity and real love because it's been promised all over the place, but not been delivered on. There's something so incredibly attractive when you see people loving each other like Jesus has loved us. And when people who are not Christians, who don't claim to follow Christ, or maybe who have just walked away from their faith or walked away from the church, when people who aren't Christians see Christians loving each other like Jesus loved the disciples, man, something profound happens. That's when we'll get the chance to introduce them to the one that they really need to know. So yes, if we love each other like this example that Jesus set, if that causes someone to come to faith in Jesus, and then that causes that person to experience life transformation, which then affects their circles of influence. And then that causes people that they know in their circles of influence to also come to saving faith in Jesus. Then that's going to cause regional and generational transformation that will last for eternity. Then yes, if we love Jesus and love each other like Jesus has loved us, then yes, this is the greatest gift that we can give the world. So what we're going to do right now is, man, we're just going to bring out buckets of water. I want you to go ahead and take your shoes off. I'm kidding, we're not going to do that. Man, I really wanted to hold that pause a little bit longer to really mess with your heads, but I couldn't. I was going to start smiling. It's an example. We don't have to literally do it, okay? But seriously, this is so crucial for our church, that we love each other like Jesus loved us, because this brings more unity, more health, more missional momentum. Like, we have those things right now as a church, and that's awesome. But let's get some more. As a church, we exist to introduce people to Jesus and lead them in their next steps with him. Well, Jesus says all people will know. That means as our church, our mission is directly tied to whether or not we love each other. If we're not, that's a tragedy. What a miss. And by the way, if we don't do that, also people get hurt. But if we are living out this commandment that he gave, then man, this is the best and biggest and most important gift that we can give to NoCo. Nothing will top it. I think it's really easy for us to start thinking about, hey, when we talk about serving and Jesus serving like this, something that can easily happen with Christians. If you're not a Christ follower, you don't have to worry about this. But this is just my observation, my opinion. Take it for what it's worth. I think a lot of times when we can say, okay, I'm going to serve, that just means I'm going to serve outside. I'm going to go be a part of a service project. I'm going to go serve people that I'm not connected to relationally. There's nothing wrong with that. Actually, we are called to do that. But a lot of times that can just be a way of getting us out of having to love each other and serve each other. That's safer. That's easier. I can schedule a time and that's it. It's a one-time thing. But people who we're in relationship with, people who we call, this is our church. We call this our church home, LifeBridge. Man, serving each other, that takes more. That takes lowering ourselves. That's ongoing. That's harder. That's what he's calling us to do right here in this example. If we're doing this, then people will know. And if people know, then they can know him. That's why we're here. And that's what we want. And by the way, the more you love each other, the way Jesus just did, the more you're going to grow. The more freedom you're going to experience, the more joy you're going to experience, the more peace you're going to experience. Spiritual fruit in Galatians 5. That's going to look more and more like you. There's something so incredibly awesome and freeing about getting out away from yourself, removing me as my own focal point. Man, I'm just talking to myself right now and you get to listen. There's something so freeing when I get out of my own head and stop focusing on me to love one of you. By serving you, even if it's hard, or it's inconvenient, or it's uncomfortable, or it's a hit on my pride, or it's not below what I think my level is. When it causes me to put to death my pride, wow, that's awesome. But I don't know about, man, again, me. I just have to keep reminding myself of that because for some reason I'll do it and then I won't believe it when it happens the next time. Oh, it won't happen this time. It won't feel great. It won't be freeing. I won't experience joy and peace. But I want to look like Jesus. That's what's great about the new year is, man, here's a new year. I hope at the end of 24, I look more like Jesus than I did at the end of 23. Step one, lower yourself to serve even when it's hard, to love even when it's hard. And man, people in Northern Colorado will then come to know Jesus. We get to be a part of that. That's awesome. We have that here. Let's keep doing it. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you for setting an example. That you're a God who gets in the mess. You're a God that does it and then calls us to follow your lead. That's a privilege and that's a gift. That's a blessing. Thank you for that. That you came into our mess and you got to us and you showed us what to do. I pray that you would bless our church, that you continue to give us unity and health and missional momentum, that we would continue to love each other like you've loved us, and that is just intoxicating when people around us experience it. And from that, would you bring revival to Northern Colorado? Let it start here because we're loving each other like the example you set. Convict us when we're not doing that, and do it graciously, please. We love you. It's in your precious name we pray. Amen.